Hi, this is Eric Hutchinson. I'm the principal broker and owner of Hutchinson Realty, and this is video 3 in the video series, How to Negotiate Your Next Home. We've talked about financing, we've talked about agency, who the realtor represents in a real estate contract, and today we're going to be talking about earnest money and a little thing called the non-refundable deposit. So I want to give you a little bit of history about earnest money before we get started. Earnest money was originally intended to be consideration to make a contract valid. It's been proven in the courts that earnest money is not needed to make a contract valid anymore, but that was the original intent. If the buyer backed out of a real estate transaction, in the beginning, sellers would always get that earnest money for compensation for the buyer backing out and the seller taking his home off the market. However, through the years, earnest money has lost its punch a little bit because earnest money is now held with a third party. The buyer writes a check and it's either deposited with the listing firm or with the title company or a third party who has an escrow account, a non-interest bearing escrow account. So the earnest money is held there until the buyer either closes, in which it goes with the rest of the buyer's money over to the seller, or the buyer backs out of the transaction for legitimate reasons like home inspection or financing. The buyer should then get the earnest money refunded back to him. Or if the buyer backs out for non-legitimate reasons, say the buyer just finds another house that they want to buy and they just terminate the contract, the seller is supposed to get that earnest money in a non-legitimate withdrawal from the contract. However, because it's held with a third party, that third party has to get permission from both parties, the buyer and the seller, to where that earnest money goes. If the contract is terminated for legitimate or non-legitimate reasons, both buyer and seller sign the termination of real estate contract agreeing to where that earnest money goes. And therein lies the problem, because a lot of times whenever the deals go south and a transaction is terminated, the buyer and the seller aren't really very happy. And so sometimes one of them does not agree to where that earnest money should go. And then if they don't agree, that third party has to submit that to litigation, and attorneys get involved and it goes to court. And sometimes it goes to court over $500, $1,000, or $2,000. And sometimes the seller doesn't want to wait until that issue is resolved in the courts because he can't sell his house until any legal action is taken care of on the property. So that's why earnest money has kind of lost its punch. So I want to show you our real estate contract and the options that realtors have whenever we get to this page on the real estate contract. This is item number 7. It's called earnest money. And as you can see, it says earnest money. A is yes, C, earnest money addendum, and B is no. Now we've got a pretty lengthy explanation of earnest money. You can see here is the earnest money addendum on the left side of your screen. And you see it talks about what kind of contract the earnest money is involved in, who the earnest money is held with. Is it with the listing firm or is it with a third party like a title company or something like that that has an escrow account? And it just goes over how much the amount is and what the options are for earnest money. Now, I will tell you that another option besides earnest money that I think has become a really good option for buyers and for sellers, but for buyers to negotiate to help their offer be considered at a higher value than maybe another offer, with non-refundable deposit. So if you look at item number 8, it says non-refundable deposit, and it goes over what the non-refundable deposit is, which it basically is a deposit, which means that if you've got $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000, you could put that down early, but it goes directly to the seller. It does not go to a third party. It goes directly to the seller, and it's usually given to the seller before closing. Now, the only problem with a non-refundable deposit is that it's non-refundable. If the buyer backs out of the contract for any reason, whether it's legitimate or not, if he's already submitted the non-refundable deposit, the buyer doesn't get that money back, which is good for the seller, but not so good for the buyer. So let's look at the options under non-refundable deposit. It says option number 1, which is A says there is no non-refundable deposit, but option number B says buyer will pay to the seller in the amount of, and it could be $1,000, it could be $5,000 or $10,000 non-refundable deposit. And then it says B, 1I, 2I, 3I. Let's look at 1I. Within so many days following the date this real estate contract has been signed by the buyer and the seller. So many days after buyer and seller has agreed to the terms of the contract, the buyer would write a check to the seller and give it directly to the seller. And that seller can deposit it into his bank account. He can spend that money, he can do whatever he wants with that money. If the buyer closes a transaction, then that money is credited back to the buyer, and then the buyer doesn't have to put as much money down. Whatever that deposit was, it was an early down payment. Now, if the buyer backs out of the transaction for any reason at all, the seller keeps that money, okay? Now look at 2I. It says within 3 business days following the agreement to repairs on inspection, repair, and survey addendum. So that's a really good option for the buyer and the seller, because usually the number one reason why real estate transactions fall through is the home inspection. And so if the buyer wants to ensure that the house passes home inspection before giving the non-refundable deposit, then B2I is a really good option for them. Now the third says other, and that's in there because then the buyer could say, you know what, there's still the appraisal that could kill the deal. I'm going to wait till after the satisfactory home inspection and the appraisal before I give the non-refundable deposit, and that's an option. However, some appraisals don't get done till a few days before closing, and that's not a real benefit to the seller. So there is risk involved in the non-refundable deposit, but I can tell you that sellers love to get money before closing. It shows them that the buyer is really serious about the property, and it compensates them if they take the home off the market and then the buyer backs out of the deal. They've got something to compensate them for that. But it is a risk, and some buyers don't want to do it. But if you are a buyer and you really want a piece of property and you are in a multiple offer situation and you're competing with other buyers, and you've got some money that you could put down as a non-refundable deposit to show the seller that you're really serious about the property, it's a good option. I always tell my buyers that if you are going to put money down anyway, if you've got 5% of the purchase price, or if you've got a down payment of $10,000, you could put down $1,000 or $2,000, and then you would only have to bring $7,000 or $8,000 to the closing, which is a really good option because sometimes the seller will take your offer more serious. So I just want to throw that out there. I think that's a good negotiating tool for your buyer. So ask your realtor about the non-refundable deposit and if that might be an option. Now, if you are going a government loan, FHA, VA, or RD, the non-refundable deposit is not an option for you. And it clearly states that on the, if you look under A, it says if buyer is obtaining government financing, VA, FHA, deposit is not applicable. So they don't allow it with that. But if you're going conventional, or even if you're paying cash, the non-refundable deposit is a really good option for negotiating your next property. So I hope this video has found you in a really good place, and I hope it's informational and good information for you in negotiating your next property. If you have any questions, you can always message me on Facebook or YouTube, or make some comments down here. I'll be happy to answer those underneath the video, or you can email me at info@hutchrealty.com. I also want to invite you to visit our website at hutchrealty.com, where you can view every listing in Northwest Arkansas, not just our listings, but every listing. You can also get a free market analysis on your property if you're a seller. It's also a great tool of our website. So I hope that you are having a good day and a good week, and I wish you the best in your next real estate transaction. May God bless you and keep you.